Welcome to Chief Evangelist. I'm your host, Ethan Beute. I'm on a mission to explore and understand the role of the Chief Evangelist and the movement behind it. How should founders, investors, and C-suites be thinking about it? How does it benefit the company? Which companies and markets need evangelism most? What does the work involve? What does success look like? And who's a good fit as a Chief Evangelist? That's what we're exploring at chiefevangelist.com. and in conversations like this one, which is brought to you by Ringmaster Conversational Marketing and their evangelist-powered podcasting package. Learn more at ringmaster.com. Today, we're learning from the principal Agile Product Evangelist at the leading visual collaboration platform, Miro. Over the past 2 decades, he served as a project manager, scrum master, and agile coach in organizations like Experian, GitHub, Visa, and Expedia Group. He's since made the shift from practitioner to advocate in a new evangelist role inside a growing evangelist team. Dave Ross, welcome to Chief Evangelist.
Thank you, Ethan. Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, happy to have this conversation. It's really interesting what you're up to at Miro in general. And of course, I want to learn more about your role, your transition into it, and kind of what you learned in that shift. We've had several people who were practitioners of, let's just generally call it an area of expertise, who have shifted into evangelizing it by connecting with teaching, coaching. You're leveraging some of the same skills, but there's some new skills as well. So we'll get into all that. And where we're going to start, Dave, is where we always do on this show, which is the most important job of an evangelist. When I throw that out, what comes to mind for you?
The most important job for an evangelist, I think, is to be engaging and have good conversations with customers. I think that's really the core of, certainly the core of my role at Miro, being able to talk to, engage with, relate to, and talk with customers about how they use our product, how they're not using our product, all that kind of stuff. And it's a two-way conversation, obviously, and it's an opportunity for them to learn about us, but also for me to learn about them and see how we can serve them better.
And what do you think about your own, willingness, ability, excitement, passion to have good, high quality conversations? Like, where does that come from for you? Is it just something you've always been doing? Is it something that you're conscious of today, or is it just something that you do?
Um, it's a skill that I've had to work on. I wouldn't say that it's kind of an innate thing that I've always sought out. I'm full disclosure, I'm a bit of an introvert, actually. I'm on the Myers-Briggs, I'm an INTJ. So for those of you out there who know what that is, the I stands for introvert. But introvert doesn't mean that you don't like people. It just means that you get your energy in different ways. Some people are energized by conversations. Other people, it's an energy drainer to engage in social settings and have conversations with people that way. So it's something I kind of have to psych myself up for, but at the same time, I've been doing, when I was an agile coach and everything, that's a huge part of your job, is to talk to people, understand what's going on with them, relate to what they're doing, understand their work, all of that. So that was really the best training ground for me to kind of break out of that mold and just ask, some powerful questions and ask, agile coaches out there will know what that is, but just asking big open-ended questions about where people are at and just trying to understand that. I do find people fascinating. And so I think that's kind of what drives me forward, wanting to understand what motivates people and what makes people tick, and also understand how I can help solve their problems as well, because that's another aspect of being that agile coach, is helping people solve their problems.
Yeah, the way you're talking that out, I absolutely see the intersection of coaching and the work I've done in engaging prospects and customers as an evangelist. It has a lot of that element to it. I mean, in coaching, I assume I've never been a proper coach per se, and I've certainly never held the title as you have. But for me, one of the things I go to all of the time is this kind of staged sequence of discovery, diagnosis, and prescription.
Yeah.
And of course, prescription is generally prescribing someone to, like close the gap on their own, like they need to do it for themselves. You're not just handing them a solution per se, but
Right.
that process of conversation through those stages. And sometimes you dwell in one longer than the other. And it's really about, in my experience, and I'll give it back to you for your own, um, you know, getting some form of affirmation or like that light bulb moment. You could often see it in someone's face or hear it in their voice or hear it in the way they're giving it back to you, that they understand and that we're like kind of on the same page that yes, we've discovered a few key areas here. Now we're going to move into like diagnosing what are the root causes and some of these other things. So like that's the way that I think about what you're sharing. Does that resonate with you?
That absolutely resonates with me, especially when you talk about like you're not prescribing a solution to people, right? You're trying to help, first of all, understand, like you said, diagnose, understand, gain your perspective on what they're saying, but then kind of serve it back to them, in maybe a slightly different way or in a slightly different perspective, and see if that triggers any revelations on their part. And like you said, that light bulb moment that comes along where people all of a sudden go, well, hey, I hadn't thought about it that way, but now since you said it, that makes a lot of sense. And so there's a lot of that. It's um, my comparison is always it's a little like therapy if you think about it. You're trying to help people get to a place on their own, but you're walking beside them on that journey. And as much as you sometimes have to suppress that urge to say, "Oh, but you should do this," or "Oh, but you should do that," you have to hold back on that a little bit, and you have to make sure that you're not just handing them an answer, because that answer may be meaningless to them. You want them to get to their answer, that will mean something to them on their own.
Love it. So I want to learn specifically, and we'll kind of walk our way into it through a series of kind of conversation zones, I think.
Yeah,
But where I want to land is how are you getting in conversation with these customers? Like, what is the process? Is it a
sure,
formal thing? Is it informal? Is it ad hoc? Is it fill
sure,
out this form to request Dave to connect with your customer account? But
sure.
I want to start kind of in a more logical approach. How did you find Miro, or how did they find you specific to this evangelist role?
Yeah, so, evangelist roles, I think aren't kind of well known or well understood. Um,
True.
so the, so of course, I've never been in the role before. Like you said, I was a practitioner before I came here. But the way that I came to Miro was actually a friend of mine who I know, I've known in the agile space for quite some time, for about 10 plus years. And he had worked with Miro extensively and supported them with some of their sort of agile questions and agile initiatives and things like that. So when the position became available, he posted on LinkedIn and said, any of my agile friends that are local to the Austin area, because that's where the position's based, you should really take a look at this. Great company, great role, great people. And so I looked at that and I'm like, an evangelist. Wow, what does that even mean? So I clicked through, I read the description, and it kind of checked a lot of boxes for me when I read the job description. It's um, you have to have subject matter expertise, particularly for this role, because mine's sort of like a vertical evangelist role, like it's specific to business agility. So obviously, I knew a lot about that. Also had the intersection of understanding developer tools. I've been a user of Miro. I knew Miro. I liked Miro. It's very easy for me to get excited about talking about Miro. Um, and then just also sort of having these customer conversations, because that was the other part of the job description that I found, I think, really appealing was you're talking to people and trying to help solve their problems, kind of in a collaborative way. And so with those three things from the job description, I thought, "Ah, I'll go for it. I'll go see. We'll see what sticks." So, had the threw in an application and had a conversation, lengthy conversations. The interview process was fairly lengthy, and had a case study involved, as well. And obviously they liked me because here I am. And it has been everything that I thought it was, even though it's very much a departure from what I was doing before. I have been really enjoying sort of the ride so far in defining and crafting and settling into this evangelist role.
Really good. Maybe go one step deeper right where you left off there in a more specific way. What are a couple of the expected or unexpected positive consequences? Like when you think about how favorable the experience has been to date in
Yep.
a new role for you and presumably a new role at Miro. I know there are multiple evangelists and we'll kind of get into that a little bit as well.
Right.
But, what is maybe 1 or 2 things that you're really engaged with or enjoying that you expected and or that you didn't expect?
Um, so let me start off with a fear. I feared coming into this role that I would be going into some incredibly complex scenarios and discussions with customers where I would be way in over my head. And so that was very definitely a fear. That fear very quickly dissipated, probably after the first 2 or 3 conversations that I had with customers. Because I just jumped in feet first. It's not like I had a polished presentation or anything that I went into these conversations with. I just kind of went into it and said, let's talk about your agile journey. Let's talk about your use of Miro. Let's talk about, some of your pain points. What can you tell me about all those things? And they were very natural and very organic conversations. And I found that I actually had some answers. And I found that I actually was able to share some perspective with them, sort of based on my own experience and background and my own usage of Miro. And then also learned a ton. So it was a really great two-way conversation, and it really kind of I remember coming out of one of my first conversations with a customer and saying, "Man, that was like a total life affirming. I made the right move. I got into this role, and I can actually make a go of it. I'm really enjoying it."
That's fantastic. I what I hear a little bit in there is like a little bit of kind of imposter syndrome, and it's not necessarily associated with the evangelist role, but like, who am I to walk into this room with these people and think
Yeah,
that I have a ton of value to offer? And we so often have so much more value than we ever give ourselves credit for. It's just like
right.
below the radar. And frankly, the I've found over the years that the situation brings out some strengths and perspectives, sometimes through inquiry itself, not necessarily through having an answer or push, it's the ability to move the conversation in a particular direction that then is revelatory in and of itself as a to use a word you've used a couple of times in this call, collaborative,
Yep.
process. So I really appreciate that. Um, you and Miro are relatively unique. I think I've only had this is going to be something like episode 36, 37, 38, somewhere in that zone.
Right.
And I think you were only the second person to respond to a job description posted by a company seeking an evangelist.
Right.
And you're also not the only evangelist at Miro. So share a little bit about some of your peers
Sure.
in the organization and how you work with them. Do you? And if so, how?
Yeah. So we have currently we actually have 4 total evangelists, myself included. One of them is quite new. We just actually hired one in Australia to look after our APAC region. Um, but as I mentioned before, we have sort of a vertical responsibility. Mine is business agility. I also work with Shipra. Shipra is she's based in San Francisco, and she is the evangelist more for design and product development. She's been in the design space extensively, and that's her passion. She actually is incredibly talented, of course, and she was doing my job and her job before I joined. So she kind of bridged the gap between design, product development, and business agility. But she's very happy to hand business agility off to me now, so that we can both focus on our areas that we're respectively passionate about. And then the last one is Bram. Bram is based in Amsterdam, and he looks after what we call the PSP vertical, which is the professional service providers. So if you think about the big consultancies, Deloitte, Accenture, and he comes from that background. I think he worked at one of them for most of his career, and now he's very easily able to relate to them and talk to them in sort of their language about because it is a slightly different use case of Miro. So he's great and has wonderful relationships within that industry and within that vertical. So that's kind of the collection of evangelists that we have currently at Miro. But I honestly don't think that we're going to stop there. There's, I think, a great appreciation and understanding within Miro for the evangelist role. We're very much in demand internally and externally with our customers to talk to them. And so I definitely see as we continue to grow that there will be more evangelist opportunities. In fact, we have a chief evangelist role that's still open. So any of your viewers, Ethan, that are listening to this today, if you're interested, please reach out and get in touch because we would love to talk to you.
Super. And that was, by the way, for folks listening, that is how Dave and I connected in the first place. When they put up that chief evangelist position, we connected over it. I shared it on by the way, the LinkedIn page. There are a number of ways to engage with the show. We're on YouTube. We're of course, in all the podcast players. We also have a LinkedIn page. So anyway, I shared that job posting there, and maybe I will again here as the search continues. And I really appreciate the vision. So you're housed in marketing. From my understanding, your marketing leaders were familiar with the evangelist function in general, and so
Yes.
they're realizing a vision that they already had. I'm just closing the gap there for folks who've heard a number of these episodes because very often it's the practitioner themselves who is kind of trying to define a role inside their organization. Sometimes it is a leader in the organization saying, gosh, maybe we should try to form this role. This is like, I feel like what you all are doing is like the advanced stage evangelism to the degree that you can, because I'm asking you to go a little bit outside your own direct purview. What do you think it is about the evangelist function? You just said that you're in demand. I shared something that I learned by talking with you that you're housed in marketing. You've mentioned that you're working a lot with customers. Um, are you also working with prospects? And I guess kind of let's just go to where I was 10, 15 minutes ago, which is
Right.
how are you engaging with these customers? Are they also prospects? Is this when you are how does the demand for your services and your engagement
Yeah.
how is that like from a practical standpoint inside the organization? How can people engage you? How do they even know that you're available to them to be
Yeah.
of service and value? I know I asked several layered questions in there, but
Yeah.
go with that however you like.
Yeah, sure. So there's many different channels through which we either get requests for us to help out. So I'll start with the most I guess the biggest channel. We work very closely with our sales team. So you're talking either strategic account executives who are dealing with some of our largest enterprise level customers. And they may be wanting to go through the process of talking to the customer because of a license renewal, or they want to drive further adoption or usage, or something has come up in the account where they've, and in my case, where they're trying to expand the use of Miro into supporting their agile ways of working. And so at that point, they'll reach out to me. How they know about me is I actually had, no, I didn't have to, but I did a bit of a roadshow internally within the organization to introduce myself. So I met with our strategic sales leaders and, gave a quick 15-minute overview. Here's who I am, here's what I do, here's my experience, and here's the value I can bring to your account. And this is how you can reach out to me. I get pinged on Slack all the time from these kinds of internal requests. So that's probably the most common way. I can also get a lot of outreach from internally. So we have customer success managers. Um, they'll also, they'll deal with a customer and there's like a very specific use case that they're trying to solve for them. And I come in and talk to them specifically about, things like big room planning or PI planning and how you can approach that using Miro. So that's just another avenue that I'm able to reach out and talk to customers. Um, we're also have here at Miro, we have a very talented team that runs the Miro, what we call the Miro Discovery Center. It's other people might know it by names like an executive briefing center. So what happens at the Miro Discovery Center is that we will bring in, a small group, usually of leadership within a company, and this could be an opportunity at the top of the funnel, or in the middle of the funnel, or at the bottom of the funnel. It doesn't really matter, but it's really like a deep dive into what Miro can do, and a deep dive into what their problem space is and what they're trying to solve for their company. And it's a full day or 2-day event where they're actually in the Miro offices. And we bring in a series of speakers, and I'm one of those speakers. I can go into the Miro Discovery Center and, spend an hour. And again, it's fairly unscripted. Again, it's not death by Miro slide or anything like that. It's a collaborative conversation where we're sitting down and talking about, tell me a little bit about your Agile journey. Tell me a little bit about where you're at from an Agile maturity perspective. What are some of your pain points that you're encountering? What are some of the challenges that you're trying to solve for? And just have those open conversations, round table discussions. So that's really another area, another sort of channel, if you will, that we have to reach out and talk to customers. The last one for me in particular is there's a series of conferences as well that are very important in the Agile space. You can think of things like, Agile 2023, you can think of Safe Summit, and a few others. So we will have key presences at some of these events where we'll set up a space for customers to come and talk to me and talk to other people at Miro. It's a little bit more of and I can set up, meetings ahead of time as well, with existing customers that we know are going to be there. So there's many different avenues that we can do. But I'm also going to switch gears on you a little bit, Ethan, and let you know that I spend a lot of my time as well. Like certainly the customer conversations is the bulk of my time, but there's a lot of internal conversations that I have at Miro. I'm educating people internally at Miro on what the value is that we're bringing to our customers for particularly in the Agile space. Because you can imagine, like internally at Miro, not everybody has worked on an Agile team before. Not everybody understands some of the the collaborative work that happens for EPD teams at some of our major enterprise customers. I've worked with EPD teams, pretty much my whole career. And so I know that perspective, and I can be an internal advocate for Agile EPD teams within Miro. And I'll go talk to, through our enablement team, talk to all kinds of different organizations internally. Could be sales, could be marketing, could be customer experience, could be, you name it. And there is a huge appetite internally to learn about that. So, I always sort of see, I have two directions that I have to face, externally and internally, and be an advocate for both groups, it was kind of unexpected, actually. I didn't expect I'd have to be doing so much internal advocacy as I have ended up doing, but it's very welcome and very, very rewarding, actually.
Yeah, really good. A few just really quick questions. What would you guess your ratio right now is external to internal? Is it 50-50? Is it 60-40 internal, external? Is it 40-60 internal, external? Like, if you had to guess, ballpark.
If I had to guess, it's like 75-25, 75 being external, 25% being internal.
Cool.
Yeah.
EPD.
Yeah.
What does that stand for?
Oh, so yeah, sorry. EPD is engineering, product, and design. So that's in a lot of tech organizations in particular, you'll have an organization and they may not call it this, but it's basically the three pillars of your engineering and your product teams along with design. And a lot of times they're all sort of managed concurrently, but But an agile team will typically have representation from engineering, from product, and from design. So when you work on an EPD team, that's what that means.
Yeah, super. I was familiar with it much more generically as product and dev, with design typically being tucked into the product org. So that's good. Thank you for that.
Sure.
And for folks who aren't particularly familiar with Agile, now we've had, other folks approximately in your space on this show. It's obviously an emergent space. I have a feeling that the pandemic and the dispersion of people to separate places where, let's just say, a whiteboard, and I know you're not limited to a whiteboard, but where the physical whiteboard in the room was a great place to do collaboration. We need to do that digitally now. It's like a very emergent, I'm sure, very fast growing space. Um, but talk a little bit specifically about the intersection of agile relative to Miro and Miro product usage. What I've heard in maybe over the past few minutes is there were a number of specific use cases
Yep.
for Miro
Yep.
immediately adjacent to her to fulfill kind of an agile approach to work. So give a little bit of like
Yeah.
very basic definition to agile
Sure.
and then kind of close the loop a little bit. Like why is this a vertical that Miro wants to have an evangelist in, I guess.
Sure. So for those who aren't overly familiar with agile, so agile is very hard to define, first of all. But the various definitions that you'll hear out there is that agile is a mindset, agile is a way of working, agile is a sort of a collection of frameworks that you can use to organize how you deliver value to your customers. Um, there's something called the Agile Manifesto, came out 25 plus years ago. It's got some great values and principles that kind of serve as the foundation. And really sort of, you know, it spins around things like self-organization. We're going to rely on people to deliver their best work by allowing them to self-organize. We're going to value people over tools and processes, those kinds of things. It's kind of a departure from what they call Taylorism. Taylorism being, of course, the sort of the top-down hierarchical approach to business and or scientific management, if you will, that's been around for 100 plus years. But this is something that kind of grew out of the software development or technology space and has really kind of spread out and is now practiced in, you have agile marketing, you have agile HR, you have agile approaches to all kinds of different sort of functional areas. So it's expanded beyond just engineering and product and design these days. So, so as you said, Ethan, Miro, kind of started out maybe as a virtual whiteboard, but it's certainly much more than that today. Um, it we like to view it sort of as an online collaborative space for innovation. That's how we view it. It's an infinite canvas where people on teams or multiple teams can come together and visually display their work and be able to talk through, solve problems, and innovate in that space. And there are definitely some use cases, sort of where we started out mostly was if you can think about doing something simple like a retrospective, thinking, something's happened or a team has completed a sprint or a team has completed, some major deliverable and they want to look backwards and talk about, what did we do well? What could we have done better? And what did we learn during that process? Well, you can use Miro to facilitate that. So the visual facilitation aspects of Miro are very powerful, and we're sort of the early use cases in the agile world for adoption. Um, Retrospective, you can drive all kinds of meetings. You can drive like the daily stand up or that you have with your teams. You can even do road mappings, user story journeys, or sorry, user journey mapping, I should say. You can do all of those kinds of, team level collaborative events on an online workspace where everybody can join in. Became much more important, of course, during COVID. And, It allows for all kinds of great things like obviously distributed teams, and async work. It enables that as well. So those are really some of the starting use cases that we've supported, but we're now getting into some more value added, use cases. So if you think about something like, I believe I mentioned it before, big room planning, sometimes called PI planning, or team of teams planning, whatever however you want to term it. That's what we're finding right now teams are having a need for. So you're talking about not just a team of, 9, 10, 11 people, but you're talking about 60 or 100 or 300 people all getting together in one space and displaying their work in a visual way, and then being able to talk with their neighboring teams. Oh, we have a dependency here on you. We have a dependency here on you. Let's explicitly call those out and make sure that we're sequencing our work appropriately so that we're not, all trying to integrate at the last possible minute and don't deliver the value that we want to deliver at the end of the day. So PI planning or big room planning, that's really one of the big emerging use cases certainly for Miro. There's lots of other players in that space, but that's definitely one that we're finding a lot of success and having a lot of great conversations with customers. In fact, I would probably say 50% of my customer conversations these days are around that specific use case for PI planning or big room planning. There's others. You can go up the value chain even further and talk about, strategizing, creating OKRs and connecting your strategy to delivery and being able to do that and show that on a canvas. You could go as far as budgeting and participatory budgeting, for example, all of those kinds of things. So there's a lot of work that we can still be doing to move our customers and to support our customers into using Miro for those specific use cases. We're just starting to scratch the surface.
Hey, thanks for listening to Chief Evangelist. For so many reasons, podcasting is a great opportunity and channel for evangelism. If you've been thinking about a podcast or you want to shift production and promotion to a team that's especially evangelist friendly, check out ringmaster.com. Their Connect, Engage, Scale program is designed for evangelist-powered podcasting for software and tech companies in the growth stage. Again, you can learn more at ringmaster.com. They're also the team behind this podcast. Speaking of Chief Evangelist, let's get back to it. Awesome. When I hear big room, I immediately go to speed and efficiency, especially the way that you described it there, like to look at mutual dependencies, figure out sequencing of things. I assume there's probably in that process of discovery of duplication of work, not just who should be doing what in what order. Is the business case specifically around speed and efficiency?
So yeah, speed and efficiency is
You know
definitely.
what? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I immediately went to kind of a Tayloristic approach to that. It's so funny. Like maybe it's just a better way to work that leaves people feeling more connected to everybody. It's both. It's probably both.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that you can gain. So first of all, if you think about it, big room planning used to be everybody was all physically in the same space. It was literally a big room and everybody was in the room together, and there were whiteboards, physical whiteboards lining the walls, and people would be able to talk and, discuss sort of through the planning process and get a shared understanding of all the work that was being done. That's not the world we live in anymore, right? You could certainly recreate that if you wanted to fly people from Asia, Europe, North America, and bring them all together. And there are customers who do that. They'll bring, 15,000 people together for a big, either semester or quarterly planning event. But think about the logistics of that and think about the cost of that. And very quickly you'll realize that there's a lot of benefit to be had by instead organizing these events as virtual events or hybrid events. You can have clusters of people in your office in India and your office in, North America and your office in EMEA, they're clustered together, but they can still collaborate and they can still come together in a virtual way and work asynchronously, which is a huge benefit. So, um, it's being able to run this kind of event in a way that sort of adapts to how your company is structured and where your teams are located and how people are able to work and the time zones that they're able to work in. I think that's the huge benefit. Um, we async work in particular, I think is when I was at GitHub, that's 100% how we work. And I see it more and more and more in a lot of the customers that I work with, just because, that's they have people around the world and people are not able to, with 12-hour, time zone differences, able to collaborate in real time. So, Miro supports that. We have great ways to support async work. We recently released what's called Talk Track, and that gives you the ability to record audio and or video. And it's embedded within the board and you can walk through the board and manipulate the board and talk people through the board. And the audio and video will follow along with that. So let's say that you did some work with your team in India and you want to explain what you did and where you got to with your planning effort. You record a talk track, and then the EMEA team will see that in their morning and they'll be able to play it back. And you don't have to have any physical overlap. You can actually talk. You can understand and get that information handoff without having to physically be in the same Zoom call or even in the same, time zone. So there's a lot of really great things that can come from this. It's a bit of a cultural shift for a lot of people, and that's what we try to talk them through and to get them to understand. Because anybody who has gone through big room planning or PI planning, the very first time you do it, it's very messy. It feels very chaotic. It feels very, there's just a lot of friction because people are trying to learn the process and learn and understand, like, how do I get this information from this team, or who do I talk to over here? And so and the more people you have, obviously, the more conversations that need to happen, and it just becomes more and more difficult to do that. But if you persevere and you go through that process more than once, everybody gets used to it, and it actually becomes apparent that, hey, we can do this. We don't all have to physically be in the same space. There's ways and mechanisms and tooling that we have now that will support our conversations around this big planning event.
Love it. The asynchronous piece, especially in you don't even have to be a fully global organization to enjoy those benefits. It's just enough to work from East Coast to West Coast of North America, frankly. And I love this idea of talk tracks. I spent a dozen years evangelizing um asynchronous video messages,
Yep.
not necessarily like social media videos and that type of thing, but in place of what would otherwise be a Slack or a LinkedIn message or an email message or whatever. So this idea of having them embedded directly in the collaborative space is just fantastic. I love it. And for folks listening, I encourage everyone to, if you have an opportunity like that, whether it's in Miro or somewhere else, um, go ahead and turn your camera on, whether you're screen sharing and showing what you are talking about at that time so they don't have to guess and try to follow along, and or better yet, your face along with the board itself or the space itself so that people can feel like they know you a little bit. In many cases, to your point, bringing a global team together is expensive, it's complicated, and all of these other things. So a lot of us are working, sometimes even daily with people we've never met and perhaps may never meet. So love where you all are going. I love that, innovation is what you support, but it's also what you live as well. Kind of it's not really a fun question per se, but it's a little bit, I'm stepping back a little bit
Sure.
when you saw like, what I wanna get at is this concept of evangelism, and
Mhm.
specifically the name of it. When you saw, a friend or a colleague of yours point you to a position
Yep.
called evangelist, do you have any personal emotional reaction to it? Beyond the curiosity of, like, what does this actually mean, and why was this shared with me? What did this other person see about this job description that fit? The title itself, like, and you could even take this to when you explained it to family or friends, like,
Oh, yeah.
What do you think about the title capturing the spirit of what you do and what I do and what all the other folks that are in this conversation are doing? And I know there's some diversity in exactly how it's expressed, but when you saw the title and now you're on the inside of it and perhaps you're explaining it to other people internally and externally, I'm sure part of your tour was teaching people internally, like, what the heck is evangelism?
Yeah.
Um, Talk about the title, talk about the function, like, how do you describe it to people, and what was your initial emotional reaction to the concept of it?
So, the word itself, evangelism, obviously has baggage, right? It comes with connotations, religious or otherwise. Mostly religious for me. That's kind of how it hit me at first. And I'm thinking, well, so you're proselytizing the use of a product, maybe you're going out and you're converting the masses to adopt your particular religion. That's kind of how it hit me initially. And of course that's garbage, right? Like that's not really what it is, but that's kind of what the connotation of the word is for me when I first saw it. And then of course you dig into it a little bit deeper and then you can kind of wrap your head around it. So, but how I describe it to friends and family is I tell them what my title is. I say, "Oh, I'm the Agile Product Evangelist." And then I get the weirdest look and they go and they pay you to do what exactly? And it's not a church. And no, 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 it's not a church. It's nothing to do with that. It's a lot of and kind of the way that I explain it is, it's a lot of, I guess, consulting. It's a lot of, um, it's definitely, certainly with it at Miro, it's definitely within marketing. So I explain, like, there's a marketing dimension to what we're doing. Um, but you're also consulting and you're also, you know, it doing some coaching along the way. There's a coaching aspect, certainly, at least to my role anyway, coaching customers to get maybe a different understanding or a different perspective of what they thought of their problem set and Miro in particular. Um, and then, you know, I've kind of explained it sort of in all those. So like I wear many hats. I'll wear the coaching, I'll wear the consulting hat, I'll wear the marketing hat. And but I really it's talking to people and helping them understand a little bit better kind of what it is that we do and understand what they're trying to solve using our particular product. And when I explain it that way, I think most friends and family that I've talked to kind of get it. Um, It's because it's the technology space too. Like, they're trying to understand what Miro is, and then I always kind of take it down to the most basic level and say, "Well, it's kind of a virtual whiteboard, but it does way more than that." And so I'm explaining a virtual whiteboard to people and all of the different capabilities and features that it has. And so it's never a 5-minute conversation is what I find, Ethan. I do this, but it's kind of this and it's kind of this too. Um, and I think I can get them about halfway through to understanding what it is that I actually do after spending probably 10-15 minutes explaining, if they're curious. Other times they'll just roll their eyes and they'll go like, "Okay, whatever, thanks. Not interested, don't care."
Yeah, totally. Do you want more mashed potatoes?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
Enough of this.
Yeah,
Yeah, I really like it, and I like where you're going there. I mean, it's interesting. When I think about, like, why is this a thing and why does it have this name?
yeah.
Um, I think it's in part because, kind of as you were saying there, and I'll just say kind of the same thing a little bit differently. It's not a sales role, right? It's not even a sales engineering role. It's not like it's
Right,
not a sales enablement role, although you might do some sales enablement potentially,
right.
especially with regard to agile.
Yeah,
It's not a pure marketing role. I mean, marketing is creating content and doing these other things, but to the degree that an evangelist is creating content, it's often distributed differently. It's got a different tone. It's sometimes a little bit editorial,
yeah.
right? Like, and by that I don't mean, opinion piece per se, but
Right,
it's got more personality, perspective, point of view, flavor in it
right.
than maybe the brand is willing to do or able to do purely on its own. It's very customer informed as well. I mean, your own stories and relationships and all these things that you're building internally and externally tend to surface in content in a way that I'm air quoting for listeners, content marketer generally doesn't have the time for, frankly. I mean, they might do 1 or 2 customer interviews or something to inform a piece or to bring it to life. So it's not sales,
Yeah.
it's not marketing, but it's got a little bit of both. It's not CSM,
Yeah.
although you come alongside CSMs all the time. So
Yeah.
it is this different thing. Also the EPD function. I know that I engaged historically with the product team more than developers because product is the interface, or at least in my experience in the organizations I've been in, product has been the interface to dev. And unless a developer or an engineer reaches out to me directly, I'm typically working with,
Yeah.
a designer or a product manager of some type. Um, so it touches all these things, but it is none of them. And
Yeah.
it's kind of all of them. So I can see why it's
Yeah.
a 15-minute conversation. Did
Yeah.
anything I say there trigger anything for you?
Yeah, like that, it even goes beyond that even a little more for me. So there's also some thought leadership that you're participating in as well, right? So there's definitely that. Like if I go to a conference and sign up to be a speaker, or I'm at the Miro Discovery Center and I'm presenting perhaps a short little talking about innovation in the agile space and how you can use Miro to support that. There's definitely a thought leadership dimension to the role that we do as well. And then I would even go another step and say that there's a lot of strategy as well that I'm trying to craft internally within Miro and decide like what do we go after in the agile space? What's important in the agile space? Where should we be? What communities should we be talking to within? Because like the agile world is very large and very diverse, and you know, our should ideally we could talk to all of them, but we can't. We have to prioritize. And how do we prioritize those conversations and engagements with the different agile communities? So that there's very definitely a lot of strategizing elements as well. So, excuse me, there's all these different hats that you're wearing in this role. And that's what I love about it, actually, is all of that sort of. I'll be in a customer conversation one day, a strategy session the next, and then sign up to be a speaker somewhere else. And I'm doing very different things. The agile nerd in me loves it because that's kind of like what I love talking about. And a lot of people eyes will glaze over when you're talking about business agility, but these are venues and channels that there's a definite hunger for what I'm saying and the questions that I'm asking. And so I find that very sort of energizing and engaging. And the nerd in me loves it all.
Yeah, the layers that you added on there, well, a couple of them anyway. You added several. Um, Subject matter expertise, kind of generically speaking, this SME function, just to bring it into very common parlance, and then the strategy, the element that you brought up. I assume, kind of as a thought leader, as an expert practitioner over decades, um, as someone who's engaging in all of these conversations inside and outside, are the go-to person with some kind of a strategic question around this. And of course, there may be channels and venues created for you to bring it forth. Kind of a little bit of a personal question. I mean, not personal revealing, but like for when I think about staying on the edge of things and being a subject matter expert, when I think about thought leadership, some of that is inherent in everything that you've done and kind of what you're doing in a very pure functional evangelism
Right.
format. The conversations you're having, et cetera, kind of keep you on the edge at some level. But how much space or how much permission do you give yourself to do other study, other research? Like, how do you invest in staying on that edge yourself beyond kind of the core work that Miro's like, we want these kinds of things done and we want them done at about this rate. How do you personally keep on the edge, and how much of that do you regard as like personal time versus professional time? Is it
Mhm.
all so blurry and muddy that you don't even separate the two? Like, talk a little bit about that. Like, how do you stay at the edge? And I'm asking on behalf of myself. but on behalf of everyone else who is an expert in something, it's not just where I'm at in my head,
Mhm.
and I know I asked a question, now I'm explaining it further. Um, where I'm at in my head is, I'm in this role because of my expertise,
Right.
but practicing the role itself doesn't sustain my expertise the same way as practicing
Yeah.
every day
Yeah.
used to. That's what got me here, but how do I keep that edge?
Yeah. No, and that it is kind of a personal question because it's something that's very top of mind for me because I've changed from practitioner to advocate, right? And it's a very different you're exposed to many different things in the advocacy role versus the day-to-day nuts and bolts of helping agile teams improve their ways of working, where you're exposed to all these different kinds of problems, but you're actually helping find the solution as well. You don't necessarily get that level of satisfaction with your customers, right? Like you talk about their problem space and you help them maybe find some solutions on their own, but you don't get to go out and implement it necessarily. So for me, the way that you kind of keep your edge or the way that you kind of stay abreast of what's going on in that area is twofold. So one, of course, all of these customer conversations, I get exposed to like huge enterprises down to the smaller startups. I get to talk through this whole range of problems. So it's just the volume is greater of being just exposed to all these different problems and then being able to think through like how could we solve this or how could we do this and make maybe some suggestions or recommendations and things along those lines. I may not even articulate them necessarily to the customer. I may articulate it to the customer success manager or something like that. But being able to sort of problem solve things in creative ways, in environments that I have never worked in and had and will probably never work in, but still being able to participate in that problem solving to me is definitely one way. I do a ton of professional development, so many classes, online webinars, go to conferences a lot, um, just online trainings as well. Like recently, I went for Agile 2023, there was a really cool training session that I found online that I was super interested in about sort of this emerging trend in Agile. And I went and it was a super small group and I got to learn a ton from that particular group, and it really just got me excited about that particular aspect of, it's not Scrum, it's not Kanban, but it's something else, and it's really cool. And so getting exposure to some of those cool things like that, to me are really, really invigorating. And then I do a lot of reading. Uh, I read more than is probably healthy for one human being. I read a lot of blogs and, there's a lot of groups that I'm in on LinkedIn, for example. I'm always reading, sort of trying to keep my pulse on what people are saying, thinking, because it's, you know, anybody who's worked in agility recently knows how polarized it is right now. And I want to understand all of those perspectives and understand both sides of the argument. I'm pretty agnostic. I don't have strong opinions necessarily one way or the other. Um, but I want to be sensitive to and understand what those perspectives are. And be Switzerland in a lot of ways and be very neutral in my approach. So yeah, those are probably the three big things: the problem solving, sort of at the customer level and internal level, the formal professional development, and then the reading. Read.
Really good. I appreciate that so much, and, you got me all motivated to to do more of all of those things in the moment.
Yeah.
Um, Before I let you go, Dave, first, thank you. This has been awesome. I've really enjoyed it. I love what you all are up to, and I love that you took the jump into this practice, that is different than your previous practice.
Right.
Because at some level your practice has changed. We referred to it as advocacy, but it's a practice in and of itself. And I appreciate you exploring that for yourself and for the benefit of the community and the company. Before I let you go, what's something fun that you? It doesn't have to be fun. What's something you evangelize in your own personal life?
Ugh. Something that I evangelize in my personal life. Um, I'm a parent of a 4-year-old, and I try to evangelize the art of patience and the art of allowing children to make their own mistakes, obviously with some guardrails and some boundaries. Um, I'm I'm not a helicopter parent. I try to be like the opposite of the helicopter parent, and I just love watching kind of how that whole process unfold. You've got this human being that you brought into the world, and that you're responsible for, and you want to make sure that they're a good human being, but you also want them to kind of grow and be their own person. So I'm a huge evangelist for that whole process of being the patient parent that isn't afraid of dirt and broken things and all of the messiness that comes with that stage of young kids. So I'm totally unrelated to Agile, as a matter of fact. So but I'm super passionate about it. Having kids is like the best job ever.
That's awesome. I love it. Well done. For folks who've enjoyed this, they want to connect, learn more about you, Dave, or they want to learn more about Miro, or they want to learn more about Agile, and you're going to be their gateway. Where's some places you would send folks to follow up on this conversation?
Yeah, I would just send them to my LinkedIn profile. So that's really the only social media that that I'm active on. So if you want to reach out, I'm happy to connect. David Ross, and you can find me a common name, but if you connect me with Miro, I'm the only David Ross here.
Very good. And wherever you are watching or listening to this, the link to Dave's LinkedIn profile, again, David Ross, will be immediately adjacent. It'll be somewhere right down below or nearby or whatever. I try to link stuff up that we talk about as we go. Dave, again, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure, and I appreciate you making time for it.
No problem, Ethan. Thanks so much for sitting down and having a fun chat with me. I love it. I love the job. I love what you're doing and talking about the job. I think that demystifying kind of what we do is a very worthy endeavor. So thank you for that, and thanks for the opportunity to share my story.
That wraps up this episode of Chief Evangelist. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to Ringmaster Conversational Marketing for helping bring these episodes to you. With any thoughts or questions about the Chief Evangelist role, message me on LinkedIn. I'm Ethan Beute, ETHAN BEUTE. For show notes and more of these conversations, visit chiefevangelist.com.